Goat Control is one of the best meta calls for 2023, and I've been at the top of the Goat format ladder with this build. Welcome to Goat Duels, I'm ACP, and I'm going to break down every single card choice in this deck and explain why you need to play all of these cards in the current meta. So let's dive in. We've got BLS as our one Chaos Monster, pretty standard in Goat Control. Then for our two tributes, we've got Dark Magician of Chaos and Jinzo. Now, some Goat Control decks just play like one tribute monster, but I like having the extra one to get rid of our Thousand Eyes Restrict if we need to. Now, Dark Magician of Chaos has been pretty popular in Goat Control lately. I think it's pretty good. The thing you have to realize about Dark Magician of Chaos is it's very hit or miss in the sense that it's either just a dead card or it wins you the game. But in a deck like Goat Control, we actually like these kinds of cards because it's all about sort of manipulating our options and getting maximum value out of our power cards. So with how powerful decks in Goat format are now, I really like Dark Magician of Chaos to help swing the game in our favor, usually getting it back with pre or call. But my favorite tribute monster right now in Goat Control is actually Jinzo. Now, I've been getting a ton of value out of this card, especially given how big trap lineups have become in some of these decks these days. You look at Geist D's Goat Control build, he's playing more than 10 traps. You look at a lot of the Chaos builds, they're playing more than 10 traps. And it turns out when you just add a bunch of Jargreeds and Solemn Judgments to every deck, you end up with some pretty beefy trap counts. Of course, Jinzo also strong against Panda Burn, which is still a fairly popular deck. And I also just love the fact that it helps you set up kill turns, right? Whether it's call for Jinzo and summon Asura, attack for a bunch of damage, Jinzo BLS, attack for a bunch of damage. I know, of course, that our opponent can use Solemn on Jinzo, but if anything, I like the fact that Jinzo forces the opponent to Solemn it, because I have had games where I summon Jinzo, the opponent Solemns, I just premature my Jinzo and attack for game. So definitely been loving Jinzo. Wish I could play more than one Jinzo, to be honest, but the card is limited to one. Then we've got 5 lights to support our BLS. 2 Faith is pretty standard. I've got 1 Merchant. I'm not super in love with the Merchant. You could consider just playing the 3rd Faith over it, but that would be a little greedy and could put us in a tough spot if all the Faiths get hit by Crossout. But just something to consider. Merchant, you usually don't get a ton of value out of it. You can combo it with Tsukiyomi. You can hope to mill your Sinister Serpent or your Dark Magician of Chaos, but it kind of just fills a role. No more, no less. But I will say, I have been getting absolutely carried by Asura Priest. I would just chalk up such a large number of match wins to me playing 2 of this card. I love that against Goat Control mirrors, often they just don't have a lot of ways to deal with this. A lot of the other Goat Control decks, they've cut their Sakus, they've cut their books. So what does that really leave them with as far as dealing with Asura Priest? So this has done great for me in Goat Mirrors. It's done great for me against some of the Chaos decks that maybe play Scapegoat themselves. Even just a regular Chaos deck, it's pretty good just because it attacks for damage and doesn't get hit by Chaos Sorcerer. So I love that, if we have a bunch of goats on the field, we can summon Asura, poke for some damage without committing a monster. Just great all-around card. At one point, I was even playing 3 of this, but I decided 3 was a bit too many. But it is honestly a wonderful card. And we've also got 1 Tsukiyomi. I think this is a pretty standard Goat Control choice now. We don't have a lot of flips to combo with it. We've got only 2 Metamorphosis. So I feel that we don't really need 2 against most decks, especially the Chaos decks. However, I do have the second in the side for Goat Control mirrors and also for the aggro decks where Tsukiyomi just kills most of their monsters in battle. Breaker, Sangan, Sinister, those are all staples. We got 2 Spy, which you have seen Goat Control decks play this before, but I wouldn't really call it a standard choice. The card has been about average for me. I do like the fact that it helps wall against the aggro decks. Aggro is traditionally a good matchup for this deck, but I like Spy to help push it in our favor even more. I like the fact that it makes it easier for us to tribute for Dark Magician of Chaos, or maybe even tribute for Jinzo. So good, solid all-around card. Against the Chaos decks, you often side it out because it's kind of underwhelming against Chaos. They just kill it for free with Tribe or kill it for free with Chaos Sorcerer. But it is good against aggro decks and is pretty decent in goat mirrors. We've also got one Morphing Jar, and this card is making a bit of a comeback. I think what happened is people started playing around Morphing Jar more, and then people cut it from their decks, but now since everyone cut it from their decks, people aren't really playing around it again. I've talked about this a little in previous videos, but again, like Dark Magician of Chaos, it's kind of this swingy, high-impact card that can potentially win the game by itself. So I've been loving this card a lot personally. I've actually been a little surprised how good it's been for me. Against aggro decks, it's not really good because Blade Knight just runs it over and they can just set their whole hand. So this does get sided out against aggro, but against any control deck really, Morphing Jar is pretty strong and it forces your opponent to have to play around it, right? It forces them to think about Morphing Jar. Tribe, not necessarily a staple in GOAT control, but it's pretty close to a staple. Again, this deck to a large extent is trying to set up game shots, and Tribe helps you do that. Discarding Dark Magician Chaos is also nice. If we're playing Dark Magician Chaos, we kind of need some discard outlets, whether it be Tribe, Morphing Jar, Graceful, that sort of thing. So just something to think about. We got Trinity Storm. Those are staples. MST, you don't have to play, but I've been liking it. This is the kind of deck, again, where you're trying to set up some big damage plays, and I like MST for that. Solid card all around. I think you even could consider playing Dust Tornado in this deck, maybe. And I also like that MST does make it more likely that our creature swap resolves, because we can end phase MST Goats, end phase MST Raigeki Break, whatever it might be. Of course, we're playing for Dark Magician Chaos, Jinzo Synergy, Snatch Staple. Brain Control I've actually been liking a lot. I think I've seen a couple of GOAT control decks play this card, but this has been overperforming for me. Pretty much the only time that I don't like to draw Brain Control is if I already have Snatch Steal in my hand. Otherwise, it's a great card. There's so many cool plays you can do with it. Against Warriors, they often have two monsters in play with the same attack, so they might have Kaiku plus Ninja Grandmaster, or they might have two Blade Knights, whatever it may be. I even actually had a game where my Warrior opponent had a Kaiku and a skilled Dark Magician in play, and I went Brain Control to put the third spell counter on skilled Dark Magician, attack over Kaiku, and then sack skilled Dark Magician, fail to find. So that's pretty cool. Brain Control can also combo with Creature Swap, so if they have two monsters in play, you can Brain Control the weaker one and then Creature Swap it for the stronger one. So Brain Control is just wonderful overall. Of course, Brain can also take Chaos Sorcerer, banish itself. Just a great card. And then, like I said, it also helps you set up game shots, right? You go, oh, Dark Magician, Brain Control your monster, sack for Dark Magician Chaos, get back Brain Control your other monster. Just really cool card all around. I'm also playing 2 Creature Swap. I have seen some GOAT control builds only play 1, but I've really been liking Swap, and to me, it's actually one of the main reasons to play this deck. Now, Chaos, I think, can be kind of a tough matchup for GOAT control sometimes, but Creature Swap is kind of your saving grace. So if you're playing against Chaos, you're really just hoping to go swap, take their Faith, take their Dekochi, take their Chaos Sorcerer, whatever it may be, and that's kind of your main card advantage source in this matchup. And we've got lots of great swap targets. We got 3 Goats, Sanguine Sinister, of course, 3 Spirit Monsters. Sometimes you even flip Spy, get another Spy, and then swap the Spy. Plenty of cool things you can do with it. Definitely been loving Swap. 2 Crossout Staple. I'm only playing 2 meta, so I'm playing 2 swap, 2 meta. I know some builds are playing maybe 3 meta, 1 swap. It kind of depends on what you expect the meta to be, no pun intended. So in general, Creature Swap is better against the Chaos decks, whereas Metamorphosis is better against the other GOAT control decks or combo decks like Reasoning Gate. And I would say against the aggro decks, they're both about equal. Maybe Swap is a little better against the aggro decks. It's kind of situation dependent. Also playing 3 Scapegoat. I really love 3 Scapegoat right now. If it was legal, I would probably even play 4. And just because I feel like a lot of these GOAT control decks have been cutting their more defensive cards, like cutting their books, cutting their Sakus. And I feel like if we're doing that, we kind of have to play 3 goats. Like, we can't just play no defensive cards and just let ourselves get run over. So 3 goat has been good for me. Sometimes you open multiples, which isn't great, but it's fine. It buys you time. Scapegoat is scapegoat. It does the same thing that it's always done. So I have been really liking this ratio of 2 swap, 2 meta, 3 goats. I know some people play that, some people don't. Maybe to some extent it's preference, but I really like the safety that Scapegoat provides. We've got our sort of 4 staple traps here. I think some goat control decks don't play call, and to be honest, there aren't like tons of targets. Our targets are basically BLS, Demog, Jinzo. So that's 3. Sangan is 4. Tribe is 5. Yeah, I mean, we've only got like 5 targets, but it's still a really high impact card. We love call with Jinzo. We love call with Demog. So I've been liking call a bit overall. You don't like to open like pre-plus call, but what can you do? Depending on the side, if you're bringing in like the Berserk Gorillas, we got some other targets, so I've been happy. We also have 1 Saku, and I have a feeling people will criticize me for this choice, but again, I kind of like to have some defense. Maybe it depends on the meta, depends on what level of play you're at, but I feel like with goat control, I'm trying to outplay my opponents. I mean, I guess with every deck you're trying to outplay your opponents, but with goat control a little more so. And I feel like against a player who is at a lower skill level than me, one of the only ways that I can lose the match is if they kind of just rush me with a bunch of monsters in the early to mid game. So that's the reason that I'm playing the 3 goats and the 1 Saku. I will say you can maybe consider putting Book of Moon in this deck over Saku. It depends. Again, it kind of depends. Saku, I would say, is better against the aggro decks, whereas Book is better against the goat control mirrors. So this is very meta dependent. You have a lot of options in this deck, which is one of the nice things about goat control in general. That's why it's lasted so long, as it keeps evolving. Then we've got 2 Solemn Judgments, and I've tested every number of this card. I've tested 1, 2, and 3, and I liked 2 the best. And the reason why is because it's a very powerful card, but in goat control, you really don't want to open it, and you especially don't want to open multiples. Because again, one of the few ways that you can get beaten by a worse player is if your life gets too low and they just sort of randomly kill you. So I have been liking this in certain matchups. I like it in goat control mirrors. Really, I just like it in any control mirror. Against aggro, you have to be careful, though. Like, against warriors, you just don't want to open this card. There are some combo decks in the meta also, like Reasoning Gate and Solemn can be pretty good against them, too, just for negating a random power card or engine card or whatever. So that is the main deck. There are, of course, some cards that I'm not playing that people might ask about. Oh, why didn't you play DD Warrior Lady? Why didn't you play Abyss Soldier? Abyss, I haven't really been liking too much. I tested it a little, and it's just one of these cards that feels awful in any situation you don't have Sinister Serpent. And even if you do have Sinister Serpent, it's not broken. So, I don't know. To me, the risk-reward isn't worth it. DD Warrior Lady, I wouldn't mind playing, but I don't know what I'd cut for it. So with Warrior Lady, it's not that I think it's bad. It's more so that I think these cards are better. Like, I have a feeling some people would say, oh, you should cut an Asura for Warrior Lady. But the Azuras are just so good right now. Just so good against the other control decks. I actually have put a lot of thought into my side deck. And I say that because I know with some of my deck profiles, the side is kind of thrown together, and I'm just like, meh, I don't know if it's good or not. But with this, I kind of tinkered around a bit. And the one thing that I'll say I think I maybe don't have enough for is the burn decks. Like, against burn, we have Hysteric Fairy and 2 Decrees. We're kind of just trying to cheese them with, like, Jinzo/Decree, and if that doesn't work out, we're probably losing to them. But I feel like we have all of our other bases covered pretty well. I think this deck is really, really prepared to play goat control mirrors, both the main and the side. So against the goat control mirrors, we bring in like the books, the third meta. We take out like the swaps. And we also put in Air Knight just because, I mean, Air Knight is still really good in Goat Control mirrors, as it turns out, or just versus any deck that happens to play Scapegoat. Air Knight, to me, it's one of these cards where it's bad versus like 75% against the meta and good versus the other quarter of the meta. So to me, that's like a good side candidate. For the Chaos decks, we have Kaiku and Mystic Swordsman level 2. Another card that I considered was Golem Sentry in the side, but I feel like Golem Sentry is a card that you probably either should main or not play at all. I feel like Mystic Swordsman level 2 is the more high impact card against Chaos specifically, whereas Golem Sentry is more of an all-rounder. But Mystic Swordsman has been getting some pretty decent value for me. Also nice against some of the burn decks where he just attacks under Gravity Bind and kills a set Duskwall. I've got 3 Gorillas here and Tsukiyomi, and those are all for aggro decks. So aggro is a good matchup for us. Even in game 1, it's a pretty solid matchup. Maybe like 50-50 game 1 or slightly better. But post-side, it gets really good because we just take out all of our dead cards like Cross Out, Morphing Jar. And actually, my plan against aggro right now is I just take out BLS, Merchant, and Asura. And the reason why is because Asura isn't good against aggro because it doesn't really attack over anything. Merchant isn't really good against aggro because it just makes their Blade Knight better. Morphing is awful against aggro for a number of reasons. And they usually keep their Kaikus in just because they know you play BLS, pre, and call. So they're going to keep their Kaikus in. But if we just like take out our BLS, well then we make their Kaikus not brick our BLS, and we just attack them with a bunch of gorillas. It's kind of a weird strategy, but it's been working for me. I haven't won against every single warrior deck, but I definitely have been winning versus the vast majority. I think book and meta we already talked about. Sometimes book comes in when you side in decree too, because if you're decreeing them, you want to have a defensive card that works under decree. But really these cards here are just for the mere meta. You also bring it against the aggro decks just because your entire plan against aggro is try to spam Thousand Eyes Restricts and creature swaps. And for the traps, we've got a couple of Dust Shoots. I know people like to main this card. I think maybe people think this is a little better than it actually is. Now, Dust Shoot can be better if you're playing something like Abyss Soldier or something like Golem Sentry. Yeah, Dust Shoot can be good with morphing, but I don't really like Dust Shoot in mirrors a whole lot. I really like it against Chaos, but I don't really like it against anything else. And even against Chaos, I feel like in general, people are getting more aggressive with like how many back rows they set. Like what a lot of people will do is set Jar of Greed and then just not activate it to play around Dust Shoot. But then, of course, if they get Heavy Storm, they get to chain Jar of Greed. So I feel like against good players, this card isn't really as good. But hey, when we play against your typical Chaos deck with Thunder Dragons in it, yeah, we just side in Dust Shoot. And I've also got a couple of decrees. So one of the nice things about our trap lineup is we only play 7 traps, which does let us bring in decree. And I do tend to bring these in versus aggro decks. Versus aggro, I take out the 2 Solemns, and then I also take out the Call. Because like I said, taking out Call makes their Kaiku worse. And then, yeah, we actually leave in the Saku with the decrees, and we just play 6 traps. Mirror, Torrential Ring, Saku, and 2 decrees. That's usually how I do it. It might vary a bit depending on their exact list. And so that's it. Let me know what you guys think about this build. It's actually been doing super, super well for me. And I also realized that this is the first time I've profiled a Goat Control deck on Goat Duels, like ever, on this channel in history of ever. So that's kind of amusing, I think. But yeah, if you liked this video, then you should watch this video next where I show Geist D playing Goat Control against Don't Copy.